many are struggling with getting their mix loud and clear without distorting. This is perhaps the most important reason why. Hi. After making the last video, I wasn't really happy as it doesn't point out why it is so important to, for example, have detailed control of sound before it gets into a delay. So let's have a look why many people are claiming about not being able to reach a certain loudness with noticing distorted sound in their mix. When it comes to arranging and mixing, there's a golden rule of thumb. If too much is happening at the same time, nothing can be really loud. While this is basically true, there's a very important part missing. I've got here a basic sine wave playing with a level of -13.2 decibel true peak. Now we add multiple sine waves playing at different pitches. All are peaking at the same value in the spectrum of -17.3 dB and summed together to a master volume of -8.1. So by playing 4 sine waves, we are raising the volume by 5.1 dB. The raise of volume isn't avoidable, but still easy to handle. Let's take a different example. I rendered the lowest sine wave to audio and matched it in volume that it peaks at -17.6 dB, more or less at the same volume like in the example before. I duplicated this audio file 4 times to have the same amount of voices, but this time they are all the same pitch. Watch what happens. See how much the peak goes above the last value? And we add up with a summing level of -1.6 dB true peak. This is 6.5 dB louder than our previous sum of 4 voices. The same amount of voices, 6.5 dB louder, just due to the fact of not having spread the voices to different pitches. And this is one of the most important findings when it comes to arranging and mixing. More stuff happening raises unavoidable the volume in the sum. This is the nature of most things. If I add more, I end up with more. The problem really starts when too much happens at the same frequency, when signals overlapping. Let me please demonstrate the impact of this problem in a different way. In everything audio related, we got an insurmountable barrier, 0 dB true peak. Everything going above is automatically hard clipped, which causes distortion. Let's assume the lowest value I can set here on the clipper on our frequency spread example without distorting the sound would be 0 dB. And nothing distorts. And now let's feed the same settings with our second example playing everything on the same frequency. Wow. The spectrum should show just a single peak. Instead we've got hundreds of additional harmonics added. The main problem isn't having too much going on. Problems really start when we have too much playing at the same frequency. But there are of course situations where I cannot avoid playing multiple sounds at the same pitch. Most sounds are as well more complex than a sine wave, so let's go one step further. Here we combine a sine wave with a second voice, but a saw wave instead. Both are playing at the same frequency as you see at the fundamentals. I volume match both signals that both fundamentals peak at the same volume, -19.2 dB. Playing both sounds together let our fundamentals raise by 3.1 dB to -16, and we got a sum level of both of -5.6 dB. But in this situation, is it really necessary to double the fundamental tone? What happens if we just high-pass the saw wave to reduce the amount of its fundamental and let the sine wave play the role? I set the cutoff close to the first overtone, which reduces the fundamental quite a lot. Let's see what happens in the spectrum when playing both together. There is no raise of the fundamental peak anymore. And with this simple method, we reduce the summing level from minus 5.6 dB before to now minus 8.3. We gain 2.7 dB more headroom. That easy. The saw wave in isolation would sound of course much too thin, but together with the sine wave there's nothing missing at all. When making such mixing and EQ decisions, don't listen to the sound in isolation. Listen to them in context with the rest of your song. So in short, music is made out of multiple different sounds, and they all add up to a certain sum level. This is unavoidable. But by reducing the amount of overlapping frequency of single sounds, we can gain quite a big amount of headroom. But what does that have to do with our send effects? Let's go again one step further and look at the delay. Here's a sine wave playing each beat at a level of minus 11.2 dB. Let's add a delay with a longer feedback. Wow, this is just droning and ends up with a sum level of minus 2.4 true peak. This delay has stolen nearly 9 dB of our headroom. Why? All delay-based effects like delays and reverbs are adding copies of the original signals with the same frequency content. I rendered out only the delay signal. Adding it to the original and muting the delay channel, you can hear it's the same. Looking at the waveform, you can see the effect repeats the original signal in a certain timing and gets quieter over time. Here's a visualization of what happens if you would do the same with MIDI, which is of course possible and would give us the same result. I color-coded the single notes, and the lines in the corresponding colors below would represent the echoing. The first green C4 gets its echoes from the A3 notes, which have a decaying velocity setting over time. The blue C4 has its echoes with a row of F#3. The light brown C4 with the notes of D#3 and the pink C4 in the row of C3. And now let's see how many notes are playing at certain points in time. They are all adding up and up. So how can we avoid this droning and adding up of signals to a high level, at least to a certain amount? Here is a plug on its own, with a fundamental peak of minus 22.8 dB and a sum level of minus 8.5 dB. I send it to the same delay. This ends up in chaos with a fundamental peak of minus 11.5 dB and a sum level of minus 0.6 dB. Too much chaos, and the fundamental peak is much too high. So I use again a high-pass filter set close to the second harmonic. Let's hear it again. That makes quite a difference. We dropped the fundamental from minus 11.5 back to the minus 22.8. This nearly doubled the headroom at this frequency, and we dropped the sum level from -0.6 to -5 dB. So the whole delay added just 3.5 dB gain instead of 6.9 dB before. And we got rid of the chaos and droning, even at this overdriven high send level and feedback. This is a huge difference, which can really make the difference between a loud and clear mix and a muddy and distorting one. There are 3 dimensions we can mix in. Volume, which doesn't need any further explanation, I think. Panning, which is highly underrated. Have a look how much difference panning can make even with sounds which would normally raise the levels drastically. Pan to the middle, we end up with a fundamental peak of -11.7 and a sum of -7.6. Panned hard left and right. We reduce the peak to -40.4 and the sum to -6.6. An overall difference of 3 dB more headroom, just with panning. The third and most underrated and misunderstood dimension of mixing is frequency spreading. Using evenly the complete available frequency range by choosing the right sounds, arranging them correctly, but avoiding frequency overlap as much as possible is probably the key to success. Happy mixing, and thank you for watching.